So why did I choose Kinder Surprise as a starting picture? I mean, one reason is obvious. It's for you. You don't know what you get before the talk starts or even before it ended. The other reason is not so obvious. Basically, Kinder Surprise was my first step as an entrepreneur. So what did I do? I went into the supermarket and weighted the eggs, right? And I figured out the ones with the figure inside, they're heavier than the other ones. So I bought those and sold it for 3 or 4 times the price on the schoolyard than the figures which were inside. So basically, me starting as an entrepreneur had a little bit of a connection with Kinder Surprise. That's why I choose that image. About myself, so I studied business in Paris, Oxford, and Berlin. Then started working as a management consultant for 3.5 years before I decided I need to start my own business. That was roughly 10 years ago. So quite some time. And in the meanwhile, I founded 4 companies, 2 in the edtech space, 1 software as a service company, and 1 e-commerce incubator. 2 of those companies I successfully sold. 1 I still work with. I did a secondary to a private equity fund, and the other one I liquidated. So basically, also there, quite some variance in experience, right? Besides that, I invest in companies. I do that for 5 years right now and have invested in roughly 40 companies. I'm an entrepreneur by heart. So what does that mean? Basically, for me, it means I don't know what else to do, right? If someone would ask me what you're going to do, I would say I'm an entrepreneur. So if you wouldn't be an entrepreneur, what would you do? I wouldn't know the answer, right? That is the way I think about entrepreneurship. And also a reason there why I choose that image, the image of a roller coaster. So for me, it's a good symbol of what entrepreneurship means, right? So sometimes you go up, sometimes you go down, sometimes you go sideways, sometimes you don't know where you are, and sometimes you even regret that you took the ride, right? So for me, it's a good symbol for entrepreneurship. The dark side, being an entrepreneur sucks. So for those of you considering becoming an entrepreneur, make sure to be aware of those points, right? And that's the only part which only works really in German. So selbstständig, being self-employed, is composed of 2 words in German, which is selbst und ständig, which means you work yourself and you work constantly. And basically that's a little bit the truth, right? When I was a management consultant, I worked less hours than I work right now. And I think that is something you have to be aware of when you become an entrepreneur. And basically you just need to know what you get into. You will have sleepless nights because of problems that hunt you down, you don't leave at the office, you take them home. And basically you will always have doubts, right? You will doubt if the product is gonna work, if the new people you hired are gonna be successful. So there's a lot of doubt in being an entrepreneur, right? So now you could look at those and think, why do it anyways, right? And for me, that is 3 reasons, right? Apart from a lot of other reasons. It's a flexibility. So basically you can decide what do you work on, where you work from, what do you do, and you can focus on the most important thing at that point of time, in your opinion, right? So you don't have anyone telling you what to do. And that was the most frustrating part when I was employed, that I had the feeling I was not working on the biggest problems. I was working on stuff like, I don't know, correcting a footnote at 4 o'clock at night on page 140 of a PowerPoint presentation. That doesn't create value for the customer, and it didn't create value for myself. So that is one of the points. You're creating something, right? You're doing something which didn't exist before. So I think entrepreneurship is quite creative. And constant learning. I mean, that is a personal thing for me. That is one thing I want to do. I want to live my life and constantly learn new things, right? So those are the reasons for me. Now the talk is called Always Be Closing, right? So what does that have to do with sales and being an entrepreneur? I hope it works, and I'm gonna let Alec Baldwin do the talking.
Because we're adding a little something to this month's sales contest. As you all know, first prize is a Cadillac Eldorado. Anybody want to see second prize? Second prize is a set of steak knives. Third prize is you're fired. A, B, C. A, always, B, B, C, closing. Always be closing. Always be closing. AIDA, attention, interest, decision, action. Attention, do I have your attention? Interest, are you interested? I know you are, because it's fuck or walk. You close or you hit the bricks. Decision, have you made your decision for Christ? And action. AIDA, get out there. You got the prospects coming in. You think they came in to get out of the rain? A guy don't walk on the lot lest he wants to buy. They're sitting out there waiting to give you their money. Are you going to take it? Are you man enough to take it?
Yeah, so basically, when I spoke about the roller coaster being a good image for how you feel as an entrepreneur, I think always be closing is something that you do as an entrepreneur, right? So if you look at sales, that's the most obvious. You need to close a client in order to grow your business. If you talk to an investor, you need to close that deal in order to get the financing on board. If you talk to new people you want to hire, you need to make sure that they sign the contract. So I think my personal belief is that a lot of stuff you do as an entrepreneur is you need to close deals. You need to make decisions and close deals. So if you talk about scaling a business and growing a business, what I will talk about right now is the let's say the areas where I think a lot of entrepreneurs face the same problems, right? I don't have the silver bullet to tell you, look, that is what you have to do and you're gonna quadruple or tenfold your business. But I think over the last 10 years, I saw a couple of things a lot of people see in common, a lot of problems people share, and what I'm gonna give you is my personal take on it, right? So it's really not that I say you have to do it like that, or that's the way you need to do it. It's just the way I think about it. So one of the points that is most crucial, in my opinion, when it comes to scaling a business is finding the right people, hiring the right talent, and making sure they stay with your company. For me, a couple of rules that I learned over the years is one thing is hire slow, fire fast. So hire slow might be more obvious, and fire fast might sound a little bit rude or harsh. But hire slow, I would say, is important because you need to make sure that you find the right person for that position. That goes along with only hiring A players, and if in doubt, saying no, right? So if you, as an entrepreneur, start in your company and you have a problem and you want to hire someone for fixing that problem, solving that problem, right? Then your normal reaction would be to, if someone applies for that position and they're 80% fit, then you would hire that person and say, look, at least I have someone who's going to take care of the problem and I can move on. My experience is, don't do it. Wait for the 100%. Why? Because the 100% person is going to be more productive than the 80% person, and you have a high risk that you will regret hiring that 80% person later on in the process. So that is hire slow. If in doubt, say no, and only hire A players. Fire fast. That's a point where I would say it might sound like an entrepreneur firing a person, but for me, it's important to understand if someone is not well in that position, right? It's uncomfortable for both. It's uncomfortable for the entrepreneur and also for the employee. The way I see it is, most of the times you sit down with someone and say, look, either we need to find a new position, or I think it's better for you to move on. What you will see is not someone being totally shocked, but also for them it's a relief, right? So it's really not meant in a way you need to look at your employees and kick the ones out that are not performing, but really in the interest of both the employee and also you as a company or the founder of a company, making sure that all the people you have on board are 100% and are on the right position. Do not underestimate the importance of communication. I think that is a thing that, I don't know, who of you works in a company that has more than 30 employees? Yeah, I think that is more relevant for that group. I think if you 1 to 20, 1 to 25, 1 to 30, then you don't have to establish, let's say, systems in order to communicate, right? The company itself is small enough so that everybody gets all the information. If you exceed a certain number of people, which I would say is about 35, 40, then you need to establish systems, right? There you have a point where suddenly not everyone is informed, not everyone knows what's going on, and that becomes a big problem, right? So if you want to sum that up, if you want to sum up the people fact, I would say find the right people and make sure they know where you're going as a company. So that's the communication part, right? And then you have done already a great job in that part. Another thing is financing, right? Submarine, normally not related to financing, but that's the way I look at it, right? If you get someone on board and they become your investor, they become part of the company, why a submarine? Because in a submarine, you cannot say after half a day or after a day, let me get off, right? You need to stay on that submarine. There's no stop. And that's the same with someone financing your company. I think it's really relevant to look for the right person. And I think that a lot of founders, when it comes to scaling a company, they gladly accept an offer someone makes, right? And say, I'm gonna invest XYZ in your company. And then people are relieved and say, yes, I accept that offer. But I would say that it's the wrong way to do it. And why is it so? Because you're in a marriage with that person, right? They will stay on your cap table forever, and they might be a big factor if you're going to be successful or not, right? And I think the thing that a lot of entrepreneurs or potential entrepreneurs don't do is looking for the right VC. So you need to think about who's the right person to back my company. So what would you look for? Would you define the right VC? I don't know, who of you raised already money within their company? How did you define the right VC?
I was actually hired by him as an associate, and later on we had a mutual connection, and that's where it was.
Okay. Someone else? Yeah?
Or is it more the network or the market entry or whatever? Decide on that part?
Okay. Yeah. Of course, I mean, the markets, the target, that's already a good start, right? Of course, it doesn't make sense to approach someone who invests in healthcare and approach them with a software as a service company, but I think that is something that is more obvious. Another thing you can do is look at the fund size, look at how many people there are in that VC, right? So if you have a $1 billion fund and you have 5 partners, each of these partners or each of those partners, they will take up to 4 board seats, right? So that's 20 in total. If they invest $1 billion, on average, it's going to be 50 million. So if you're seeking 10 million in financing, that's not the right VC for you. That's the way you have to think about financing. Is that the right partner? And I think a lot of VCs are also frustrated by entrepreneurs not doing their homework and not looking at the fact, who is the right VC for me? And cash equals oxygen. I think that is a question. If you are in a position and you ask yourself, should I raise more money? Yes or no? If you can, I would say do it, right? Cash is oxygen. Oxygen is life. And you can stay longer on the submarine. So if you want to sum that up, I would say making sure that you have enough oxygen on the submarine, that you're there with the right people, and you need that many oxygen that you can change the course of your direction whilst you're on that ride for a couple of times before arriving at the destination. Because what's happening if you build a company, not everything goes according to plan, right? You have to change your course, and you need to make sure that the oxygen lasts while you change the course. Sales, right? Also part of scaling. And there I would say, think about pricing, right? A lot of people, if they think about sales, they think about how can I sell more? But your revenue is determined by the amount you sell and the price you sell it for. So the easiest way sometimes to scale is to change the price, right? For the first company I did, we made an A/B test and we increased prices by 40%. What happened? We realized the same revenue. Of course, we had less orders, but with let's say a higher price, it was less operational stuff in the customer department. It was less shipping. So basically, it was more profitable for us to do less orders, but realize the same revenue. Another example is for the software as a service company. We approached the 20 customers that paid the lowest price, and we told them we're going to double the prices. So of course, some were unhappy. Some did finish the relationship, but another, let's say 50% of those customers paid double the price, right? And the same thing happened again. With lower amount of customers, we were able to realize the same amount of revenue. So that is something you can think about. And to give you an example of someone who did it even more bold than we dared to do so, is SAP. When I bought SAP Hybris, they increased the prices by 10 times, right? So they said, look, the customers, they don't really have an option, at least in the short run. So when they acquired that company, they increased prices by 10 times. So selling 10 times the amount would have been way more complicated than taking the price that they actually already get from customers and increasing that by the factor of 10. Then another thing for sales, know the metrics, right? What you measure is what you get. So basically what I think is really look deep down in your sales funnel and understand how your sales is working. Look at how many customers do I need to approach or potential customers do I need to approach in order to make one sale? What are the different steps of my sales funnel? Where do I have the highest conversion rates, right? Where do I have the lowest conversion rates? Which part of the sales process do I need to work on in order to become more efficient? And actually, what is the customer lifetime value of the customer that I acquire? And how much money do I have to spend in order to acquire that customer, right? So I think a lot of people don't think about all these metrics before they go out and chase the customers. So it might even be that you're onboarding customers which will never be profitable for you, right? And then the advice there would be not to do so, right? Look at the numbers and understand who you're targeting. Another point, there always has to be someone selling. And it sounds easy to do so, But my experience from my own startups and also from the companies I invest in is that I would say people start to sell too late, right? They do tests. They say, what would you pay for that product? And people say $25. For me, that doesn't count, right? If you go out to your friends and family and ask, what would you pay for that product? It doesn't count. You need to get the money of potential customers. That's the only validation. And I would advise you to do that as quickly as possible, right? Not only hypothetically asking people, but making them pay for your product. And another thing for sale is the more I train, the luckier I get. That was actually a golf player, and he won a couple of tournaments. And there was a journalist who told him, look, I have the feeling you're quite lucky these days. And he responded and said, I don't have the feeling I'm lucky. I have the feeling the harder I train, the luckier I get. And I think that's the same with sales, right? When I told you I don't have a silver bullet and I don't know how, or I don't have the secret recipe how you can quadruple your revenue, I think the thing in sales is you just need to be out there and present the product in front of people and know the metrics, right? So go out there and sell it to people, right? Strategy. Think big, right? There's a point I never really understood. You hear it a lot of times and you see it on startup posters and then you think big. Why? Why is that? And then someone said something smart and I understood why thinking big is the right way. And that is, what do you do as an entrepreneur? You put all your hours and you put your maximum brain capacity to the problem you're trying to solve. So why solve a small problem, right? If you do so, if you spend all your hours available, your maximum brain capacity, then solve a big problem. And that is a point where I realized, okay, thinking big makes sense. Do not forget about competition. That is actually one thing where a lot of the startups I see are not well prepared. They don't know their competition, and they have too little information about what the competition is doing out there in the market. And if they have, let's say, information about the obvious competitors, then what happens a lot of time is that they define the market too small. So how would you define the competition for Uber, for example? What do you say is the competition for Uber? Taxis. Right. That would be the obvious answer. And for me, that is a too small definition of competition, right? Because for me, competition is transportation. What is the underlying need? I need to get from A to B. So competition for me for Uber is riding a bike, taking public transportation, taking a taxi, I don't know, taking anything electro. So basically there's a lot of more options in order to get from A to B. And that is something where I think a lot of people don't think about that in a broad range, but rather in a small and defined space where they say, Uber, okay, taxis. But take a step further and think about what problem am I solving as a company, or what problem do I solve with my product? High variance versus low variance problems. That's another thing that took me quite a while to figure it out for myself, right? Normally, for me, the instinct is if someone approaches me with a problem, then I try to solve it, right? But you should ask yourself the question as an entrepreneur or as the founder of a company, is that really a high variance problem? Does that matter for my company? And what does that mean? if you look at, for example, the way you pay your employees, right? You could be, I mean, the most important thing is people get their money on time. So now you could set up the most efficient way in order to pay your employees, but it wouldn't matter in the end for the competitiveness or the success of the business, right? If you pay the employees just on time, or if you do it in the most efficient way that is possibly in the world out there, right? So that would be a low variance problem. It doesn't matter in the end for the company, or at least in a broader picture. High variance problem is, for example, if you look at your competitive advantage, if that's defined well, if you present that in a pitch to potential customers, right? So if you do that really efficiently, then you might be able to win more customers. If you do that really poorly, then even with a great product, you're not going to be able to win customers. So think about the fact, is that a high variance problem for me and my company, or is that a low variance problem? So tips. All entrepreneurs face the same problems. That's really something I firmly believe, right? So it's not that someone who runs a $1 billion company has other problems than someone running a $20 million company or running a family business. So I think you're basically facing the same set of problems, right? At a different scale, but fundamentally it's the same problems. Exchange with other entrepreneurs, and that's, sorry, we are in stealth mode. For me, that is the only thing, if I talk to a potential investment and someone says, yeah, I'm gonna start a company, but I cannot tell you more because we're in stealth mode. That's the immediate point where I stop that discussion. I don't believe, I mean, except for if you're working in pharmaceuticals and you have a patent or something else. I mean, there are exceptions, but apart from that, I firmly believe you're smarter in a group than you are on your own. And you're not going to be able to figure out all the problems that you're going to see on your own or whilst you're in stealth mode, right? So for me, that is a no-go, right? And something you learn over the years, or at least I learned, is to trust your gut feeling. So if the head says yes and your gut feeling says no, my decision would be no, right? Holds true, for example, whilst hiring people. If you look at a CV and you think, really looks great, but then you have this discussion with that person, think, yeah, there's nothing really wrong, right? But your gut feeling says, no, don't do it. My advice would be go with your gut feeling, right? And then in the end, I think that is something which is also quite obvious, right? If you go out there and you start to build things, you start to scale things, you're gonna break things as well, right? You're gonna make mistakes. For me, the most important thing is that you learn from your mistakes. So if you do something wrong, it doesn't matter, right? It happens. Otherwise, if you never do anything wrong, probably you haven't done anything. But if you do the same mistake again, that's not good, right? Then, as Tesla would say, it's a choice, right? You made the decision to make that error again, or to really do that mistake a second time. You weren't careful enough. So that is the only thing I would make sure that you learn from your mistakes, right? And I think that's it from me telling you stuff, and I would like to enter the discussion right now. So I think it works the way we pass the mic around, right?
Based on your experience in your previous companies, how did you find your first customer and the first 10 customers? Is there a good or a set of best practices, or is it just hustling?
I think most part is just hustling, right? Basically, I went out there and tried to convince people to. I think. Don't know if it's on. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Basically, it's going out there and trying to convince people, right? So there is no. I mean, it depends on the product, I would say, right? So there products where you can easily try it via online marketing, for example, where I would spend a couple of €100 on Facebook or Google on paid advertising and try and see how the conversion is. Other, if you're more in a B2B space, you need to talk to people, right? I personally believe that selling a product yourself the first couple of times is a good way to educate yourself as well, right? To get feedback from potential customers, see at which point of time the sales cycle or the sales funnel has problems. So you will get the metrics and the information I talked about while scaling a business and looking at the right numbers. That is the information you will get whilst doing the sale yourself for the first couple of times, right? What I most of the times try to do is understand something and then hire someone to do it, right? If I understood how it works. Because I think for both sides, it's fundamental to have a basic understanding. Why is that? Because if you hire someone, you need to tell them what they should do, right? Of course, you leave them freedom and they can do it differently, but you need a basic understanding of the task that you want them to do. And also for that person that comes in, they're gonna respect you more if you know what you're talking about, right? If you say, go out there, do sales for me, and you don't even have a clue how to do it, I think, perhaps you should figure it out yourself and then hire someone to do it.
Hi, thank you for the very nice and humble talk. I have a question regarding your very first slide, the Kinder Surprise one.
Yeah.
So when you went out on the playground, what is it that, how did you convince the kids that a little bit weightier Kinder Surprise would be better than the others? And following to that question, do you have any structure when you do a sales pitch or when you're trying to convince someone in the way you convince people?
Yeah, okay, perhaps I haven't been precise on that. Of course, I took out the figures, right? And then I sold the figures, not the egg. And of course, because they tell you only in every seventh egg, there's a figure. And those were, at that point of time, those were collectibles, right? You could buy them on eBay and stuff like that. So basically, because people collected them, there was a certain value attached. And regarding doing sales, I think, everyone sells differently. I think you have to find your own way of selling stuff. And for me, that is understanding the problem of the potential buyer and also understanding how it can help them within their organization, right? So what do they need in order to look good in front of their boss or in front of their investors or whoever they report to? How can I help them to look better? That is for me the basic question when I sell to someone.
In your SaaS business, how did you go about pricing? Because I assume you built something in the beginning, so you had a lot of costs, CapEx in the beginning, and then very small OpEx. How do you go about pricing when you determine how to spread the CapEx in the beginning?
Good question. Honestly, we charge the maximum amount we dare to charge. And then we develop from there. There's no, I think there's no theoretical way of defining a price, right? Of course, you can approach that problem and look at what the competition is charging, if there is competition. You could go there and say, that's my cost base, and I charge 30% on top because that's a profit I want to make. But we just went out there and tried. And over the time, let's say we became more bullish and dared to charge more. And then after a while, you look down at the bottom end of your customers and you think, okay, for where we stand right now, it's not enough what they're paying. We're charging a different market price, and then you can go back to them and do what I told you. Tell them, look, you need to pay double the amount right now.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, you've mentioned that you had to liquidate one company.
Yeah.
What went wrong?
A lot of things. Wrong timing, wrong product. we couldn't convince the people to stay there. So the company that I was talking about was an e-commerce incubator that we founded in Lagos, Nigeria. So it's a different ecosystem, right? We wanted to do e-commerce down there, and payment was a problem. 60% of the people in that country at that point of time were unbanked, so we had to handle a lot of cash. Second point was there was no delivery option, right? So you couldn't use a postal service because there was none. So we had to build our own delivery fleet, and the market was not ready yet for the products we wanted to sell. That was another problem. And then the last of the problems was that if you want to sell stuff online in e-commerce, you need people who have experience in online marketing. Basically, at that point of time, of course, because e-commerce was pretty new in Nigeria, we couldn't hire people locally, but we had to use the brains of expats, right? And they went down there to Lagos and said, yeah, school is a pretty nice place. After 3 months, I don't know how long I want to stay. After 6 months, they wanted to go home. So basically, it was a multitude of problems where we said it's too much. We cannot fix it. It was just too much, and then we liquidated the company.
Hi, I'm a founder of a B2B startup, and we are bootstrapped. So currently, it's me and my co-founder. I'm doing sales, operations, and all of that, and my co-founder is doing the IT and product part. So my question is, because we are limited in resources and we are very cost efficient, what's your marketing strategy in your B2B product? Would you do outbound or inbound? And why would you go on the strategy?
I would say there is no right answer, right? So test outbound, test inbound, and see what works more efficiently, and then try to scale it to the level you can scale it with the limited amount of money, and then from time to time try both again and see if something's changed, right? I think you cannot say that's the right way to do it. My firm belief is you have to test it, right? You have to see what works better, and even if you test things, you need to tweak the setup, right? So it's not gonna be that you test something and then you have the final results, right? So you test it over and over again, and you change small things and see how they change the result. So I think basically there's no right or wrong answer. You have to go out there and test it, right?
I was more interested in your experience, but also I have a follow-up question.
Yeah.
What is your favorite sales hack or creative sales hack?
Depends on the business, right? In the end, what you try to do is to get leads efficiently, right? My favorite sales hack nowadays is a company that I invested in. And what they do is they offer services for students which come from other countries to Germany, right? And they found a way to be established on the university websites. So basically, they get a lot of leads for free. So if you can find something like that, right, where you're right at the source where people seek information, and then you're able to position yourself as a provider of a service at that point where people want to make the decision, right? So there's a high likelihood that they're going to purchase the service, and if you find a way in order to be at that point without any cost, that's a genius sales hack. But it's not given that you can find something for each company that works like that. Sometimes you just have to spend money in order to acquire customers.
So thank you very much for your great presentation. I have a question. Coming from a design thinking perspective, we would start out with like wireframes, going and test a specific design and build that product. And when beginning that, maybe we can convince people to just test it for us, but sometimes we need to pay them to test it. So we give them incentives so we can test it with them. And then someday we might change it and they need to pay us so they get the product. What is your experience with that, or how's your view on when to change this, or how we could develop it better? Or actually, I think it's not a right or wrong answer about that, but I wonder, have you been through that?
Let me think about it. Actually, no, I haven't, right? So I have never started a company or did a product where I offered it for free and then moved on to a paid phase. So, you basically, you answered the question yourself, right? Again, I don't want to be annoying with it depends, but it really depends on the product, right? It depends on the customer experience. You cannot say that is the right point of time to change it. I think what I would do is if I offer the product for free and people use it, right? I would ask them, what do I need to add in order to make you a paid customer? And then see if you get responses which are similar, right? And then you're onto something. You can start building something on top, right? I personally believe it's not the right approach to offer something for free and then after a while say, look, now you get the same thing, but you have to pay. I think if you add something on top, the conversion will be easier.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks as well for sharing the insights. I'm a co-founder of a software as a service business. We are not VC backed, but we have a seed investor. And the recent month we have established to become cash flow positive, and our team is slowly growing now. You did talk about high variance versus low variance problems. And what freaks me out at the moment is sort of the inner fight between working on the near-term things. Basically, for me, that means making sales, because there are not a lot of other people doing sales, and there is always someone that needs to do sales. And versus the midterm perspective, establishing sort of a system that creates sales by itself. I know there's no right or wrong, but can you share how you managed this conflict? If it was there.
Basically, I think, I mean, as an entrepreneur, you work hard, but to a certain extent, you're also lazy, right? So what I did do when I started selling, let's say, a product, right? And then I realized after a certain while, I don't learn anything new if I do the 20th or 21st sale. That is the point of time where I thought, okay, now it's the time to bring someone on to do that, and me focusing on other problems. Yeah, I don't know if that helps in your position, but I think as long as you learn something while doing the sale yourself, you're gonna become better at also giving someone the information of what is important in a sale if you hire it. For example, hire someone to do it, or if you want to establish an automated system, right? As long as you learn, you're going to set up a better system, or you're going to give more detailed information to someone doing the job later on. So I would do it until the point where you realize I'm not learning anything new.
All right, so earlier on you mentioned that you had to increase prices by 40%.
Yeah.
I'm curious, how come that you undervalue yourself in the first place?
Yeah, again, I mean, for that company, basically, we looked at the competition and the pricing of the competition, and because we were new to the market, we offered slightly lower prices, right? So that was the way we established prices, but there can be many reasons why people would pay more, right? So perhaps the market was not fully covered, and people actually wanted to buy the product no matter what the costs are, right? So I don't think that it's necessarily undervalued. It's just a different group that we were able to target with a different price, right? Which in the end for us was a more profitable sale. And you could have increased prices to 50, to 60, or 70% more, right? It's just a different group of buyers you would attract, I assume, right? For me, it's always that example. There was an app for the iPhone where actually it showed a diamond, I guess, and you could buy it for $1 million, right? A lot of us, or basically I would say everybody of us would say it's stupid. It's a stupid waste of money. But there were like, I don't know, 20, 30 people who bought that, right? And they bought it for a different reason. You could have offered that for 99 cents, right? People would have bought it probably as well. Perhaps more people would have bought it. It's just a different reason why people buy the same product, and I think it's a little bit. It goes a little bit in that direction. But I mean, if someone of you in that room finds a way to determine the perfect pricing, then I'm more than happy to come to you and let me teach a lesson, or be teach the lesson, right? So I think it's hard to establish the right pricing, and I believe there's no such thing, right? It's a different buyers group you address.
Thanks a lot. Love to hear another round of applause, please, for Johannis.
Girl,